I've got a bit of a fascination with grid-based instruments. The first video I ever put on this channel was about a simple little grid-based sequencer, the ThinkGeek Bliptronic 5000, and since then I've accrued a few other grid-based instruments. The Synthstrom Deluge is kind of a fixture on this channel. A couple months ago I picked up Casio's red Millennium Falcon, and most recently, through a Craigslist synth trade, I got the Medusa by Polyend and Dreadbox. So if you ignore the 8x8 grid, the Medusa kind of just looks like a synth module. But you add in the two screens, the grid, and it goes from normal synthesizer to science fiction prop. The grid does act as a sequencer like on the Deluge or Novation circuit, but where the Medusa differs is that while you can sequence up to 64 steps, it feels a lot more dedicated solely to sounds and sound making than to arrangement. Now something like sound quality is pretty subjective, but what I found is fun about the Medusa is that you have a ton of modulation sources. Some of them are kind of normal. You've got LFOs, you've got envelopes for having parameters steadily increase. But in my opinion, the most interesting and I would say most performance-oriented mod source is the pads themselves. Along with being able to play notes on the grid, the pads also register aftertouch data. What that means is that you can set them up to change the pitch when you, for instance, wiggle your fingers sideways. You can make it change the filter cutoff when you tilt your fingers up and down. Or it could change the filter resonance when you press your fingers down harder after triggering a note. Now, as far as sound sources go, you've got 3 analog oscillators and 3 digital oscillators, and those digital oscillators can also use wavetables. A wavetable is kind of like a stack of different waveforms that you can move between, so combined with an LFO, you can get a sound that kind of changes back and forth moving between that wavetable. I want to share a quick thing about analog versus digital, because I just see people talk about this online a lot. Now, I've owned digital synths, I've owned analog synths, I probably listen to too many synthesizer demos for my own good, and my hot take here is that digital synths can sound just as good as analog. I'm not saying that the Medusa sounds good because of its analog oscillators, more that it sounds good because of its wealth of sound shaping options. I've been using the Medusa with effect pedals, a Canyon delay, and a Flamma reverb that I found on Amazon. Normally on this channel, when I'm demoing a synth, I'll show off its dry sound, but I felt that it would be appropriate to use pedals here. My reasoning is that if you plan on picking up a higher-end synthesizer like the Medusa, you're probably going to run it through pedals or add effects in your DAW anyway. So that's the Medusa, but what do I like about grid-based instruments in general? For me, I think it's the usage of space. On an instrument with a traditional piano keyboard, notes are generally just spread out horizontally. With a grid, you can have tiers of notes, allowing you to cover multiple octaves in a relatively small space. It also makes more sense to me in the case of, say, 4x4 drum pads like on an MPC, which I don't own, or on the Casio Trackformer, which I do. Playing drums on the small grid of pads just feels more intuitive to me than, say, playing drums that are mapped to piano keys. I made this video because I thought that grid-based instruments and the Polyend Medusa were interesting. But, I realize that so far I've really just been praising the Medusa, and this is not a sponsored message or an advertisement, so I want to speak a little bit critically of it for a bit. When I first got the Medusa, it bounced me right off. I thought that it felt clumsy, it felt imprecise, the screens felt too tiny, the initial calibration takes forever and happens every time you turn it on. Overall, I just couldn't really understand what I was doing, and I wasn't really having fun with it. I pored over the manual, I watched a ton of YouTube tutorials, and while I love its sound, I'd say I'm still in the process of warming up to it as a whole package. I found that the information on the screens is presented simply enough that it doesn't feel too cramped. I've built up some muscle memory for the sliders and all that. I found out, thankfully, you can actually skip that initial calibration. And as I've started to learn how to program and use the aftertouch on the grid, it's begun to feel less clumsy and a little bit more expressive. So in closing, I think that the Medusa and grid-based instruments like it are all super cool. But I'm not trying to sell you on these devices, or on making music with a grid. Because the thing that's even cooler than making music on a grid-based instrument is making music the way you like to. So my closing question for everyone watching is, do you make music with these kinds of devices? If you're open to it, drop a comment and let me know. And on that topic, I want to thank everyone for watching and listening. I'm actually pretty thrilled because we recently got past 400 subscribers, and that's something I couldn't have done without you. If you're watching and you're not subscribed and you enjoyed this video, please consider hitting subscribe to support the channel, and if you click the little notification bell, you'll be alerted next time I upload. With that, I want to thank you, and I look forward to seeing you in the next video. Bye.